everybody. Thank you very much for coming to the show. Welcome to our post-show Q&A for Blackshaw's Theatrical Dunville for Wondrous Arts Festival and Fringe. My name's Vicky Weston. I work for Blackshaw, and I'm just going to be kind of hosting the Q&A, just wrangling some answers from these guys, make sure they don't go on forever. But just quickly, I'm going to get everyone to introduce themselves along the line so that you all know who they are, so you can address them by name when you ask a question. Go.
I'm Katie McCullough and I wrote London Pride.
I'm Tom Slatter and I played Pavel.
I'm Matt, aka MJ Starling. I wrote Audience with the Ghost Finder.
I'm Coridwin, don't worry about pronouncing my name right, it's Welsh and strange. And I acted in Audience with the Ghost Finder.
I'm Ellie and I directed both plays. Okay, great. So, does anybody have a question that they'd like to ask first? I've got a list, so don't panic if the inspiration doesn't strike you, but if anyone's got anything to ask, then... No? I can kick off, it's fine, I came prepared. Okay, I'm going to start with Katie and Matt as the writers and ask you, I hope, quite a simple one, which is, why did you choose to write these plays? So we'll start with Katie. What inspired you to write London Pride?
London Pride is a few years old. And it actually came into existence because it was written for a competition, which had a very strict brief, which was no longer than 45 minutes, no more than 3 characters, and no more than 1 location. And it had to be in response to a David Cameron sound bite, which I'm going to be odd and horribly paraphrase it, but basically it was along the lines of multiculturalism is working in England, and this was the response. And I quite liked the idea. I quite like writing with restrictions, and I quite like the idea of utilising 1 location. And for me, a pub's quite interesting, just because you meet all sorts in there, and I think we've all been in a pub where we've met a Joe. In fact, there's a Joe downstairs. Who I gave a light to earlier, so that was very peculiar. So yeah, I think for me that's where London Pride came from.
Okay, and for you, Matt?
So obviously it's based on some existing source material. I first came across the stories that it's based on the Podcastle podcast, which is a fantasy short story podcast. So they ran William Hope Hodgson's The Whistling Room, which I think is the 4th Carnacki story he wrote. And I heard that I was coming home from another play through Croydon, and it was slightly kind of dark and a bit spooky anyway, and I was listening to this kind of spooky story. I kind of fell in love with that, the scenario and the character, and I went on Project Gutenberg and I read all the rest. There's 9 stories in total. And it was the Electric Pentacle. I saw that in my head and I thought, why has nobody put this on the stage before? I really want to see that in reality rather than just on the page. And so that's where that came from in the first place.
And does that encourage anyone to ask any questions? Got one over there.
What made you choose to do a Carnacki story where he finds something supernatural rather than a Carnacki story where he's basically just a early 1900s Jonathan Creek?
Okay, so for anyone who doesn't know the stories, in the original stories, it's about 50-50. About half the time, Carnacki investigates something and it turns out it's completely mundane, or it's somebody it's basically a Scooby-Doo story, and he pulls the mask off and it turns out it's the caretaker or what have you. And about half the time, it turns out to be a real supernatural thing. I felt like I've kind of answered my own question by saying Scooby-Doo. I felt like if I did a story where it seemed to be supernatural and then turned out to be mundane, that would be unsatisfying for the audience, and it also that wouldn't have given me as much scope to explore some of the character stuff that I wanted to get into with Carnacki, with ideas about belief and about faith and about skepticism and that kind of thing in the face of actual supernatural events. So yeah, I just didn't think that a mundane mystery would give the full scope, give the character full reign.
Go.
So we sort of talked about at the beginning, I'm interested in how you all feel about the conclusions of both plays, whether you are satisfied with them or whether you, I mean, I think with Ghost Finder it's kind of pretty ambiguous, but Katie, are you interested in writing a second act, potentially telling us whether it's Joe? Tell us now, I just wondered if you were ever ask any questions, anybody?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we were just talking about this now. London Pride as it is a very stunted play, and I know that. It's a very odd play in that it's kind of a collection of vignettes over a period of time, and I think because of the existing restrictions, there is a lot more to explore. I'm reluctant to do a second act for it, because I like the ambiguity, but I know that there is more to explore. The last two scenes are quite opposite ends of the story. So yeah, I think there's definitely more to explore in London Pride, but I wouldn't say a whole second act. I'm reluctant to hand everything on a silver platter to an audience and say, I'm going to tie this up for you, don't worry about thinking about it. But I think the feedback that we've been getting so far from an array of people is that they have some wild and crazy ideas about what's going on, and I quite like that. I like the fact that people think there's something untoward about Pavel. Had just a very enlightening conversation downstairs about 10 minutes ago about the possibility of Pavel's involvement with Johnny's death. Again, there's lots of avenues which haven't been explored.
That's a lot of masterminding for a pub job.
And then the other idea was that Pavel isn't Polish. That it's a front.
It's on the front.
Yeah. So I know that there's lots there. And I'd like to go back to it and pick it apart. But it's been fantastic seeing it on its feet as it is, because I know I've been in safe hands, and also I'm fantastically in love with all my cast. Amazing. So it's been brilliant. So I'm kind of seeing it manifest in front of me, and knowing where there are gaps that I would like to kind of rip it apart.
I think what's interesting is the phrasing you used about whether the ending is satisfying. Because for me, on first read, I was really angry. I was really disappointed in Shelley for making that decision, because I thought, you've got more inner strength than that. Why have you... He got all rapey. Why did you just decide to go on a date with a man who's assaulted you? But I think that's what could be explored. I think is more with the characters. Why do they make the decisions they're making, and what other things might be influencing them? And I like you say, the last two scenes kind of feel like they're quite bookendy.
Yes.
And it would be nice to kind of get the gap filler there.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think we've been working with some kids today doing a workshop about London Pride, and one of the exercises we got them to do was we'd taken that particular scene between Joe and Pavel, where Joe's really pushing the knife in, and we see Joe as that kind of very racist kind of, he's pushed to his peak, and he's actually saying what he's wanted to say all along, and it's just coming out in the most ferocious and vicious manner. We truncated that scene into there's a bit of swearing in it, for kids, and we got them to write a hidden scene about what the characters would say afterwards, and it was interesting seeing that insight from 15-year-old kids who were kind of siding with Pavel, kind of going, I can't, which is good, it was very heartwarming, kids kind of saying, I can't believe that someone would say these horrible things, what Pavel is saying is right. And I think there's definitely more to explore with Shelley being in the middle and trying to be that person that kind of tries to placate both of them, and also there's definitely more to explore as to why she turns to Joe. but also, you know, she might not stay with Joe. It might be just a stopgap, as in, I've gone on a date with you now, stop asking me. But yeah, so I think there's definitely more to explore.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Has anyone else got a question? I've got some more that I can ask, so I can turn to my sheet of paper here. Can we talk a little bit about some of the unusual theatrical choices that we had in Ghostfinder? And I think this is a question for kind of both of you about you playing 3 characters and how you found that and why you chose to do it like that. And then I've got a follow-up question about whether that's how you kind of envisaged it in the first place. So.
Yeah, how was it, Corinne, playing 3 characters?
How was that?
That's really what that made me audition for the project. To be honest, was the playing those 3 very different, I suppose, very different on the outside characters, and so that just seemed like a really interesting, exciting challenge, and we worked a lot at the beginning about sort of, you know, coming up with different physicalities to make it just a bit easier for the audience, because actually at that point I didn't know whether there was any sort of visible change, you know, the costume and things, which is amazingly constructed. So actually we started doing that from just kind of very physical point of view, and obviously some of the vocal things as well. I made him Welsh, and I'm really sorry. that was not intended. But I don't think you didn't express any antipathy towards the Welsh nation.
Never mentioned in the stories. You can make him how you like.
So yeah, I'm sure that sort of maybe Karnaki purists might object to that, but it just seemed. I just think Dodgson is just so lovely.
He's
got a heart of gold, and for me, I've got Welsh ancestry, and that just seemed to work a lot. But yeah, I found it just really fun actually, and really exciting. Just trying out all the different, and actually trying to make the mother and daughter clearly related, but had to be, again, I didn't know that there was that clever costume thing, so they had to be kind of different enough that people wouldn't get utterly confused, but still very obviously mother and daughter, which was kind of quite
We had some great conversations and workshopping towards the beginning of the process where we talked about the historical period being a good way to help us, give us clues as to how Florence and her mother would behave and the generational differences. And obviously they've both got very strong RP, but we talked about kind of the fashionable, slightly laconic way that Florence is talking, and she's, you know, probably into reading romance novels, and whereas her mother is very stiff upper lips, straightforward generation, all about appearances and so on. So
much lower.
Yes, much lower, very deep, pronounced voice.
Yeah.
And had lots of fun playing around with vocals, because what I really didn't want to fall into the trap of doing is going, oh look, it's a girl playing a boy, and having her do a very deep voice for Dodgson, because I just don't think that's particularly helpful. So actually the accent was the ideal way to draw that vocal line, which was really good. But it was really fun working with such a very capable and talented actress and playing around with it.
And was there a particular reason that you decided on combining the 3 characters into one?
I think the script is so sort of fast-paced in that it's very wordy, but there's so much business and action, and the quite in a similar way to London Pride actually. It's a sort of snapshot process, and some of those scenes, particularly when you go back to Dodgson and Karnaki talking, are very short. And I didn't want for there to be clunky, you know, lots of different people on stage to detract from that. And I think the idea that Karnaki is narrating a story, it's a sort of film noir-esque way, narrating his past 48 hours, having that reenacted with the person he's telling the story to, just wove together really nicely and kept things very simple and focused on the action and the characters. That's why.
And did you kind of see it like that in the first place, Matt, or was that 4 separate characters in your initial imagining?
I did always see those 3 characters being played by one person, but I consciously, I try not to, when I'm writing theatre, write anything in a way that forces the company or the players to play it a particular way. So I wanted it to be possible to play with different separate actors for each character. But yes, I did always see it as those 3 being played by one person.
Okay. Has anyone else got a question? Okay, I've got a couple more about London Pride, and then we'll kind of wrap it up with that, I think. so one for you, Tom, about Pavel, because obviously, based on your accent, you're not Polish every day of your life. But how did you find identifying with Pavel, and how did you kind of overcome those challenges?
Identifying with Pavel is probably an interesting way of putting it, but I do have Russian heritage. My mother's side is Russian Jewish, and they're migrants to the UK in the 30s, sorry. And so I do have Eastern European heritage. I've been to Russia quite a lot, and I've been to Estonia as well. I haven't been to Poland, but I have met plenty of Polish people, as I'm sure we all have. So there's just that element of it, and the rest is just down to the script and the imagination, really. It's a great script to work with on the role, and there was so much in there already that, most of that just happens within the actual playing of the script. So it was great to work on. It was great fun.
Great. Okay, so I think we'll kind of finish up with tossing up between two before we finish. So I think maybe we'll talk a little bit about why you picked these pieces for a Waff double bill, and why we did a double bill in the first place, because I think that's probably the biggest question that everyone's asking.
Well, it's a number of reasons, really. The Wandsworth Arts Festival's not been running for a huge amount of time, and this year they were very keen on getting local artists and groups involved and have a fringe section to the festival. So when I heard about that, I thought, well, Blackshaw is based in Tooting, and we want to be very much a part of it. So went along to a few meetings, kind of gauged what sort of thing that they already had on the programme, and I just felt there was a real sort of gap to be filled for theatre. There was a lot of exhibitions and dance and music and lots of wonderful things, but not a lot of theatre going on. So obviously Blackshaw is very multidisciplinary. We do lots of lovely things, but one of the things that we've done right from the get-go 3 years ago is regular new writing nights. We do them every other month. They're open to anyone to submit any piece of writing, be it theatre. Oh yeah, go to the website, it's all on there. But we take a wonderful array of theatre and comedy and music and poetry and all sorts of new writing, and I thought that would be the perfect place to go to writers that we've worked with on these new writing nights and see who's got something floating about that they'd like us to take a look at. So contacted Katie and Matt and a few other people, had a look at what they had to offer us, had a sit down, had a chat, and I felt that the two pieces, in terms of logistics, worked very well in terms of running time, fitted together very nicely, but also in terms of content. They're both very portable pieces, and actually they feel very different, which I think for a theatrical double bill is really interesting. I didn't want to say, well, we're going to do a theatrical double bill and it will be themed on X thing. I wanted to give people a little bit of something different, a first course and a dessert, if you will.
Although I helped out writing some of the marketing copy for the brochures and things. I was surprised when I came to do that, because we originally thought that we were only going to get one entry for both plays in the brochure.
In the brochure, yeah.
I was surprised when I tried to write one bit of thing to sum up both plays, how many things they do have in common.
Thematically.
So they're both about sort of being in a sanctuary while everything's horrible outside, and they're both kind of about the people that aren't there anymore and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And drinking, obviously.
Yes,
also that.
Very
yes,
important.
also booze.
Yes, and so it all just came together quite nicely. And theatrical double bills are something that kind of intrigued me. They're quite retro, and I think there should be more of them because it's cracking value.
Okay, and with that wonderful thought, I think we'll finish. So thank you all for coming, and thanks for listening to this podcast.